Corporate Access Team podcast. Today, I have the privilege of being joined with Rosa Rowles, a human risk analyst, OSINT investigator, and ethical hacker at Social Engineering LLC, the firm behind some of the most respected social engineering engagements in security. She's a certified social engineering pen testing professional, 5 years in the field, and teaches an advanced practical social engineering to private and public groups. So, Rosa, thank you very much for being here. And I hope I got all of that correct.
You did, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, social engineering as a profession is certainly not something that you see often. So, how exactly did you get into social engineering as a career?
Mm. So it's interesting. My background is actually in hospitality, but I was always fascinated by psychology. So I would always be researching different aspects of psychology, principles of influence, what makes people do certain things. And I first heard about social engineering through Chris. He was actually a friend of mine. And I started listening to the podcast, the Social Engineer podcast. So I would be at the hotel. I was doing billing at the moment. So I was in the office, putting in these bills, punching in numbers, and listening to the podcast and how he would break into these banks and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, it would be so cool to be able to do that type of job. But I always thought that I don't have, the background for that. I'm not qualified. So I wasn't even thinking about trying to be a social engineer. And eventually, I expressed my fascination with psychology and with the work that he did. And he offered me an entry level position. And 5 years later, here I am. So that's how I got into the field.
That's fantastic. And you say you're not qualified, but I mean, working at a hotel, I mean, that's all you do is social engineering, right? Like talk to people, interact with them.
It's so interesting that you say that because in my interview, one of the managers asked me precisely that. So before I would do group billing for the different events, but before that, I spent a lot of years doing front desk. And of course, we get people coming down, they're upset. So one of the managers asked me, what do you do in a case when you get someone that's upset? And I said, well, the first thing is to really listen to what they have to say. And then we give them options, which are the options that we would normally offer anyways, but it empowers them to make the decision. So they're like, you're a social engineer already. So it's true. There's so many aspects of social engineering that we use in our day-to-day lives without even realizing it.
That is a very good point. And a perfect question. What types of social engineering do you use on your daily life?
Ooh, so many. I'm laughing because my son has already caught up. He's like, I can tell that you're using, he says, your Jedi mind tricks on me. Um, so my favorite one is active listening, which it took a while. When let's say your spouse is telling you something, perhaps whether you agree, disagree, you're formulating a response in your mind, which is not necessarily helping you in the end. Because in order to influence someone, you really need to know what it is they want, what it is they're interested in. So by suspending your ego and truly trying to understand what the person is trying to say, it actually puts you at a better position to be able to come to terms with having an agreement. So that's one of my favorite techniques that I like to use. I try to remind myself to use every day.
It's funny that you picked basically, ego suppression and active listening because ego suppression itself isn't really a technique, but it's one of the most powerful methods. It's one of the I always say it's one of the hardest things to do, but if you can do it, it comes back and it has the most it has the most benefit to you because so many people, we're all, what is it, 80% of human beings are extroverted and we always like to talk over each other and get our say what we want to say, and we don't really listen to people. But you can't really, like you said, you can't really actively listen until you actually suppress your ego and actually like care what the other person is saying. That's
Exactly.
yeah, it's so okay. So you're a social engineer. You used to work in a hotel. Do you think, given your knowledge of hotels, that there's any hotel you couldn't social engineer your way into?
Well, it all depends on the staff and it depends on how well trained they are. So that it always comes down to that. We can try the different techniques, but if they're well trained and they know what to look for, you know, it's going to be a hard one. For the most part, with hotels, I would say they have so many different rotating shifts and so many different staff throughout the day that as a social engineer, if something didn't work with one person during the daytime, I would come back at a different time and try to get my way in through that instability through their different schedule changes. So that'll be, you're giving me an idea now. Now I'm gonna have to find a hotel to break into.
Yeah, I mean, hotels are fascinating. They really are because there's so many people constantly coming and going and everything else, and yeah, they're fascinating places. And also, if you're in the public sector, they're used for a lot of other things. But it's there's always shady people in the lounges of hotels. I'm sure.
Always.
I'm curious. I'm curious if, in your experience, if you've ever experienced stuff like that. Just random groups of people who hang out in hotels. You're like, you're not guests. Why are you here?
Well, I've the hotels that I've worked at. So I started working in hotels in the UK, which were very small, boutique type of hotels, and the guests that we had were very wealthy for the most part. So it's very exclusive. So I never got to see that there. And then I came to the States where the hotels that I worked at were huge. So there were always people coming and going, and it was always super busy. So I never really noticed any particular group that didn't belong there per se. But I have definitely seen many interesting groups of people come through the hotel with different costumes, dressed up like animals, really interesting and cool stuff. I'll put it that way.
That I can only imagine all the kinds of crazy stuff and people you've seen over the
Yeah.
years. So, okay, so you've transitioned from working at hotels. You've gotten a job as a professional social engineer. What is your daily life like as a social engineer? Like, what do you do on a daily basis as a professional social engineer?
Well, I start my day with my cup of coffee, like most people do, and I check my email. Always important to see if there's anything going on that I should be aware of. And then I try to organize my day depending on the different tasks that I have. So I may have vision for 3 or 4 different clients. So I'll prioritize that depending on the number of calls that I have to make. I may have to do OSINT for a social engineering risk assessment that we do, where we have very specific targets given to us by our clients. And after that, I'll probably go into loading up any fishes that I have to do for the day. If it's the end of the month, I'll probably have to complete a report and then go back and do edits and all that fun stuff. So, of course, there are always team meetings that kind of break up the day and the routine. So, yeah, just a lot of different things that go on during the day.
Fair enough. So do you do more phishing and phone based social engineering then?
Concentration on vishing and fishing, but for the most part, we do a high volume of vishing. We've also done um, hybrid, so where we send out a phishing email and we're telling our targets to call IT because there's an open ticket, and then they call us, which is a lot of fun because we're getting a call from someone that already believes they're speaking to IT. So it's very interesting. We've done a few of those as well.
So now, by all means, anything that you can't say, the whole sources and methods stuff. But I'm curious, what is your preferred go-to? So you get somebody who calls you, you've got a cover story or a pretext as an IT
Mhm.
person or something. What is your go-to to get information out of them? Do you go straight for rapport building, or do you use kind of like an authority, or what is your go-to?
So we use a combination of both. Authority is naturally built into the pretext. So if I'm calling them from IT or if they're getting an email from IT, they're automatically under the pretenses of authority. Then after that, I usually like to use sympathy. Whereas I'm like, hey, yeah, I have this long list of employees to call, and I've had like such a terrible day, and I'm hoping you can help me. And I'm sure this can be quick for you and for me. So by doing that, I'm like, hey, I don't like this any better than you do. But the quicker we get this done, the better for me, the better for you. So let's get to it.
Do you ever use any, I guess you could call them kind of like virtual props? Like we always have, the classic of like the get on YouTube and get like the baby crying in the background app or video and just have that go. Do you use anything like that, or is it all just you?
Yeah, we don't usually use that. The only thing that I guess external that I have used unknowingly and unwillingly is my dog. Every now and then she'll bark, and they'll be like, "Oh, I guess you're working from home." Like, "Yeah, my dog," and people love that. "Oh, what kind of dog do you have?" "I have a dog too." So that actually works for rapport building. But yeah, it's usually just based on principles of influence.
Perfect. Okay, so you're trying to get these people to give up, something. Um, so two questions for you. In your experience, what are you typically going after? Is it Active Directory credentials? Is it just general information? Assuming you can say, by all means, if you can't, that's fine. And what do you think like the success rate of these people are? Like, is if you're calling a company, do you think it's like 1 in 10 employees, 1 to 1, 1 in 100? Like, how many do you think are actually fall for this?
So the flags that we go for are actually designated to us by our clients. So if our clients want us to elicit passwords, MFA, user IDs, sometimes email addresses, sometimes even managers' names. So all of those are the different flags that we go for. As far as how often people fall for this, again, it depends on how well trained they are. We have worked with a client where in the beginning, we had 80 to 90% of people giving us some sort, not all the flags, but at least one of the flags. At the end of the program, it went down to like 5%. And that just goes to show how powerful this training is. Once they get acclimated to what a vision call sounds like, and how to detect it, how to verify the caller, they're shutting us down left and right.
That's fantastic. Okay, so first off, 80% is insane.
I know.
But so can you okay, so you've mentioned training 3 times now. Can you give me kind of a general idea of like what do you do to educate your clients on, hey, look, this is a call that's probably suspicious, right? How do you take somebody as a group from 80% or 90% all the way down to like 5?
Mhm. So within there's two aspects. We have the reporting aspect of it, and then we have our meetings with our points of contact. And we stress positive reinforcement. So we want employees to feel empowered to be able to report these calls and not to be chastised for, oh, you fell for this. Because then employees kind of check out from the whole training aspect of it. So within our, I guess, some of the tips that we give them is always verify the caller. So we tell our clients that there needs to be a set verification process within their organization and that all employees need to be trained on what that process is. So that's the first thing. And then once employees understand that, whether it's internal training, they also get emails. I've actually had employees tell me, oh, yeah, you're one of those phishing calls. I got an email that you guys will be doing that. Or I'm sorry, I've been told that if I can't verify you, and they will literally ask for my ID, which I'll give them whatever my alias ID may be. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I can't verify you, so I have to end the call right away." So once they know the proper procedure as to how you verify an individual and how to end the call, they get really good about doing that.
That's fantastic. So I just for everybody listening here, this is, I think I looked into this a while back, and I think there's something like 60-ish% of all cyber attacks start with some form of social engineering. So this is not like a one-off. So anybody listening to this who has any influence into a company, realize like this is actually really important, because it's a lot easier to break into your system if you are given the credentials rather than have to get them through the internet or
Exactly.
something. Um, so do you ever come in after the fact, like a client says, "Hey, we were attacked through this social engineering means. We want you to come in and basically try to fix things for us, so it doesn't happen again," or is it all preemptive?
So we get a little bit of both. We have gotten clients that have had these types of attacks, and they actually tell us what their vulnerabilities are. So we concentrate uh, our pretext around that. And then it's a team effort. So we gather the information that they want us to test, and then they concentrate on getting their employees up to par with the training. So with those, both of those efforts, it really does make a difference for them.
Okay, that's actually really fantastic. So, I sorry, the fact that you can take somebody from an 80 to 90% failure rate to like a 5% failure rate is just insane. I mean, that's such a, I mean, it's almost inverted, right? Um, yeah, that's, geez.
It is. And it's really cool when you see it in the graphs that we have. It's like, wow, you can actually see how it drops drastically. So that's, even though reporting may not be the most fun part of the job, it's very rewarding to see. I will say that.
Well, well, I think universally everybody hates the reporting phase, but yeah, I absolutely understand what you mean by that, about
Mhm.
getting the, seeing that your efforts are rewarded for that. So, okay, so as somebody who does a lot of social engineering in my job, I will say that I always prefer social engineering face to face, because I can, get those biofeedback things, micro expressions, all that kind of stuff. How, what, like, I personally really don't like social engineering people over the phone, because I lose all of it. I'm so
Mm.
accustomed to seeing it that taking it away from me is, yeah, I realize it's a crutch. But how do you handle the fact that you can't see the person that you're actually talking to? Like, how do you deal with that? Because you lose so much information about them.
You do. So I'm really in tuned into their tone of voice. Um, and at times I even try to match that. So if they answer the phone and they're kind of in a rush, I'm like, hey, I know you're probably busy. Let me try to get this out to you real quick. And if they're a little more paced and they sound even a little skeptical, then I try to work on the rapport building techniques and just kind of slow things down, like, hey, how's your day going? And also apply other principles, such as, your most of the employees have already done this update, and I just had just a few left. And so I really pay attention to their voice, and you can kind of get a sense of what their mood is over the phone. So I try to use that as a tool to help me gauge where I need to go with my influence techniques.
Perfect. And when you are doing this, do you have, because these phone calls, I'm sure we've all gotten, had to call technical support at some point in our life, and you're basically pretending to be technical support.
Hmm.
Do you have a minute? Do you have an hour? How long do you have typically to try and social engineer people?
Typically, the calls are between 2 and 5 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
So they go by really quick. Um, yeah, and it all depends also on the targets. There are some people that like to talk. So we had a particular pretext that was about a happiness survey. And one of the questions is, how appreciated do you currently feel in your role? And this person went on to say about how terrible management was and about how they should implement this, implement that. So that call took like 8 minutes, I want to say, 8 to 10 minutes. But typically, and you try to get it away from that, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, I don't want the person to feel bad. I want them to feel heard. So I'm like, you know what? I'm adding all of that to my notes, which we do, and then we pass it on to the client. But yeah, typically it's between 2 and 5 minutes.
Okay, interesting. I mean, that's okay. So for anybody listening to this, put yourself in this position. You have 2 to 5 minutes to talk, to bump into a total stranger, build rapport with them, extract some type of information you need, and then probably pivot back to just tedious stuff, right? And you've just a few minutes to do that. That's really challenging. Like, really put yourself in that headspace of how would you do that. So it's not just your hello, how are you. This is very hard stuff. Um, so when you're having these phone calls and when you're having these conversations with people, one of the things that I've always had an issue with, probably mostly because I deal with people face to face more often, but once you've built up rapport, once you found whatever strategy, commonality, or whatever, oftentimes it's not a question of can you get them to talk. It's a question of can you get them to shut up, right? They just want to talk. They
Yeah,
just everybody wants to talk
exactly.
about themselves. They want to talk about their day, everything else.
Right.
How do you balance the scope and the ethics of, so you start to talk to somebody and you've built up rapport with this person, and you're there to get information, and they start telling you about personal stuff, or stuff that
Oh, yes, I've had those. I've had this lady was telling me about, oh, yeah, I maybe have missed that email because I was on vacation last week, and my grandchild was born, and I was there helping my daughter, and she had this issue, and I'm thinking, oh, like, lady, please don't tell me all of your personal life, but um, you know, I always try to remember that we're speaking to people, and this is a test for them. Um, but I also want to dignify them, and I don't want to cut them off abruptly or leave them feeling bad in any way. But if I have to if that prolongs, I say, hey, oh my goodness, you know what? I just got a message from my manager. I have to join this meeting. I am so sorry I have to let you go. But I am following this up with an email. So if you have any questions or you want to reach back out to me, feel free to do so. And of course, that email never arrives, but at least, and they're so understanding, like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't want you to be late for your meeting. So that's usually what I do to get away from that.
Well, that's very kind of you. One question though is, oftentimes when I've had to social engineer people, you come in with a pretext or a cover story, and you play a role for a few days, and but by the end of it, you're giving usually a presentation to the company or the board of directors or whoever, and that person sees you, right? Whether it's a secretary or an employee or whoever, and there's that kind of, what's the meme with Leonardo DiCaprio where he's pointing at the TV. Do you ever have that where you have to go to the company or the board of directors or give your report, and the person that you were social engineering realizes for the first time, you lied to me?
Yeah. Actually, I had that happen when we did our first on-site, actually a few months ago. One of the ladies that she kind of had a feeling that something was off, but we ended up getting into the building anyways. And at the end of the engagement, we went into a boardroom with most of the people that we interacted with. And she was there. She's like, I knew it. I knew it. It wasn't real. And I knew. So she was actually a good sport because she was like, yeah, I knew there was something off. So it was a good learning lesson for her as well, because even though she knew something was off, she didn't stop us. But you also get that feeling of feeling a little guilty, like, yeah, I'm just doing my job. But in the end, we try to, like, we have this motto, we try to leave them better for having met us. So, and that's where the whole delivery comes in. Like, throughout the whole delivery of the pretext, throughout our whole interaction, yes, we're using principles of influence. Yes, I'm social engineering you to get you to do something that you normally would not, but I'm still not using extreme fear or any tactics that are going to belittle you in any way. So that towards the end, yeah, there's that factor like, oh, I knew it was you, but they're not upset because they're like, oh, yeah, we were actually like laughing and joking the whole time we were interacting. So it's a good feeling all around in the end.
Well, that's good. That's awesome. So, if you don't mind my asking, when you did your physical breach, did you use any techniques other than social engineering, or building scaling or lock picking or underdoor tools or bypassing or anything like that, or was it all social engineering?
So this particular one that I was on, it was mainly daytime. We didn't get to do any lock picking. Um, Actually, there were some buildings that were government facilities, and they preferred us not to use any of the other tools, which was very interesting to solely rely on social engineering and OSINT to do this. But I'm so looking forward to lock picking. I'm practicing already for my next one.
Well, it is a lot of fun. Um, Generally speaking, if you break in during the day, you get to, one of the first things you have to decide is if you break in during the day, you're fighting the men. If you break in during the night, you're fighting the machines, right? Like that's usually the way this
Right.
goes. If it's
Hmm.
daytime, it's social engineering. If it's nighttime, it's alarm bypassing and stuff like this. But the interesting thing, and the reason I asked you that is so many people, when they think of what does it take to physically pen test a building? They think, well, I know I need to be able to climb a building, pick a lock, bypass a door, blah blah. But it's like, no, you don't. You could just be a very charming, charismatic person and just walk right into the board of directors rooms, and that should
Right.
scare everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, just being able to walk through, we got in and we're walking through hallways that had so many files that were classified. And we're opening filing cabinets, we're pulling out files, taking pictures, and that went undetected, which is, uh, pretty scary. But yeah, it's all about how you charm your way in, basically.
Well, it's funny. In the where we are, we usually refer to a concept with building security as front heavy security, where all the security is bottlenecked to like the entrance and exit, where people are expected to come in, and that might be a biometric scanner or a PAC system or a receptionist. But then once you've passed that, usually everybody past that point, it just assumes, well, if you've gotten this far, you must be authorized to be here. So, how do you do,
Mm,
sir? And it's like, and that's just
right.
it. And so when you think about big buildings with lots of security, it's like, yeah, yeah, you have lots of security. But if I bypass that one part, that front entrance or wherever it is, that you basically have no security. Like it's just everybody just assumes I'm supposed to be here. So
Right.
why do you? I'm just curious, and I know this is off the
Mhm.
cuff, but why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it is the whole concept of tribe mentality. If you are in this building, you're one of us and you belong here. So, and it also has a lot to do with how you carry yourself throughout the building. If you're walking around, looking around your shoulder, looking suspicious, you're going to draw a lot of attention to yourself. But if you walk like you belong there, and like you said, you're saying, "Hey, how are you?" People just naturally assume that you belong in that building. You're one of the tribes, so why even bother asking you? And those two components, I feel, is what stops people from approaching you and asking you, "Hey, what are you doing here?"
That's honestly, yeah, that's exact. I mean, that's very, very true. And for anybody listening, this is another reason why you need to take building security very seriously because any person, such as my guest right here, who charms their way past the front desk or secretary or entrance and gets inside, well, you might as well you have flat physical network. She can go anywhere because most buildings are set up in a flat security network, right? Everyone from the CEO to the intern can go to every floor and go to every place, and yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah, scary.
So, okay, so now that you've done both, which do you prefer? Do you prefer social engineering over the phone or in person in a building? Just out of curiosity.
Mm, I'll have to say that the in-person, like the pen testing kind of spoiled me. Just that adrenaline rush. I do miss it. So I would have to say that is my favorite by far. Um, but if it wasn't for all the vishing that I have done, I may not have been as good um, with the in-person break-in. So I feel that prepared me with the different pretexts and impersonation, alias, all of that came into play.
That's yeah. That's I mean, practice makes perfect, of course, and I'm sure that that helped prepare you. Did you have any kind of issues going from doing it strictly over the phone to in person? Like, was it some kind like was it awkward for you in any way to go from one to the other, or was it very
I'm sorry,
seamless?
you cut out there for a minute. What was
Oh,
that again?
sorry. I
Yeah.
sorry. I just asked if it was hard going from social engineering over the phone to social engineering in person.
Well, I thought it would be, to be honest with you. I thought I would be very nervous approaching this. Now I'm face to face with a person. Like you said, I can read their number. I'm thinking that's going to make me very uncomfortable. But somehow, so one of the pretexts was that I was a real estate agent. So dressing the part and having even like business cards, or whenever we did the pretext of the internet provider, you have the little logo on your shirt and you have the clipboard. All of those props made me feel so secure in myself that I was who I really said that I was telling them. And that was almost like a safety net for me. So once I convinced myself that I was Jasmine the realtor or whomever from the internet company, and having those props add to the pretext, that actually gave me another layer of security.
So, okay, that I mean that makes perfect sense. So you basically have to social engineer yourself to psych yourself up and get into that persona.
Yes, yes. So I had to impersonate and get into character to get into that persona. And I'm telling myself, if I am the real estate agent and my clients need to get in this building to take pictures because, you know, the manager or the owner of the property said that we can, why would they stop me? So once I'm convinced of that, you have a certain level of certainty when you're speaking to the person. Actually took a few tries, but we made it. We got in.
That's fantastic. So it's interesting. So you said that it took you a couple tries. When you're dealing with physical, in-person stuff, like what does that mean? Do you have like multiple teammates who are coming back and trying again, or are you using different cover stories, or what's your plan?
Well, it can be a combination of all of those aspects that you mentioned. But in this particular case, the lady that was the receptionist that came to the door, she took my business card, came back out, and actually told me that I needed to speak to the property owner to get permission from him and that she needed him to call her directly. So if she didn't hear from him, there was no way we were getting in. So I asked her for the name of, I'm like, well, who is the property owner? And she's like, well, if you're the realtor, you should know. And I'm like, yeah, I'm actually just helping out one of my colleagues. She's out of town, but I can definitely get that from her. So then we went back to the car, doing some OSINT, trying to figure out who the owner of this property was. And the property was attached to a hardware store. So after 20 minutes of OSINT and we still couldn't find out who the manager was. We had to go into this. I went to the hardware store because it was a small town. And actually, the people there knew the name of the manager. And they told me to where to find him. And I actually got him to call this lady and give us permission to go in.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so
Yeah.
you went straight for like the ask the friend type of thing where,
Right.
yep, okay,
Right.
perfect. That's awesome. Well done. That's the double-edged sword of small towns, right? Like everybody knows everybody, but at the same time, that could be good or bad.
Right. Yeah, that could be good or bad. And that's one of the reasons. This was the lady that at the end, she's like, I knew it. She actually knew someone at the real estate company that I was impersonating. And she called her up. She's like, hey, do you know a Jasmine that works there? She's like, no. So at the end, she was able to say, I knew there wasn't a Jasmine that worked there. So the whole thing with, in small towns, everyone knows everyone. So it worked in our favor, but it could have gone the other way as well.
Yeah, but I mean, good for her. Good for. I mean, that's the end of the day, right? Like
Yes.
it's good for her for being so
Absolutely.
on point. You know,
She was.
one thing that people they say like, well, if you fail to get into the building or anything else, that's a failure on you. It's like it's really not. I mean, that should be the standard, right? Like the standard should be that you don't get in.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, and that's what we often tell people, like, go with your gut. If you know something doesn't feel right, because in the end, we came back and told her, "Hey, we spoke to the manager. Did he call you?" And she said, "Yeah, he called, but this is a government facility, so you still can't get in unless my manager approves of you guys coming in." So then she gave me the name of the manager, spoke to him, and he gave us permission and met us there and gave us a tour of the building. So she was doing her due diligence. Now, the thing that could have been improved is as we were walking through, we saw her. She could have stopped us at any time. But it goes back to what you were saying earlier. Now we're with her manager. So it's the whole principle of authority, tribe mentality. We got in. But again, if something doesn't feel right and you're suspicious about something, that's where employees need to be empowered to speak up.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, the people that you typically, at least the people that we typically target, are not like the IT sysadmin technical people, or the heads of security. You're going after the janitor. You're going after the receptionist. You're going after the kind of the low hanging fruit, right? Because
Right.
companies don't seem to understand that when you ask them, like, hey, who holds the keys to your kingdom, they're like, well, the CEO, the board of directors, the technical guys, maybe security. It's like, yeah, but what about the janitor? Like, they're here after
Mm-hmm.
hours, unsupervised. And it's,
Yep.
yeah, it's, yeah. And you were talking about nighttime breaching, just something, food for thought for your next fun story. But one of the first things that the janitors after hours typically do is they show up after hours. All the employees are gone. They open the doors, they turn on the lights, and they shut off all the alarms. And it's like,
Mm.
so you time that breach at just the right time, and you impersonate
Just the
an
right time.
well, hey, when we meet in the middle, I'm just an overworked employee who's got some jerk boss who's got me here after hours, and you're meeting in the
Hmm.
middle, and yeah, so but yeah,
Yeah.
but people don't think about it like that.
Right.
Um, so okay, so this is an interesting question. So you have a very diligent secretary or front desk woman who's doing her job. Um, but what do you tell everybody else? Because you were able, like in that story alone, you were able to successfully engineer at least two people, kind of three, but at least two people who both of whom should have known better. So what do you tell them?
Everybody else, as far as the other employees there,
Yeah.
or
So that sorry, you mentioned that you kind of successfully social engineered the front desk lady who was kind of on you, kind of not,
hmm
and then you had the manager, and then you had the building owner. But you definitely got both of them from the sound of it. So how do you encourage other people to be like, hey, look, this is you should have checked more. You should have double checked or done other things, especially if it's a government facility.
right. Yeah. So during that briefing that we had afterwards, um, we were telling them again, actually, one of the other buildings that we were breaking into, um, someone, we were there as internet providers, and we were telling them that we had to switch. They were switching over to another internet provider. We needed to get into the server room. So they called one of their local IT people within the building, and the guy came up and tried to open the server room for us. Now, somehow their key didn't work. So now they're calling their main IT department to see if they can get another key. And that's what they were like, wait a minute, who's there? Who are you gonna let into the server room? And when he said, oh yeah, it's this company and we're switching over, and the IT manager said, no, we are not switching over. I don't know who those people are, but you need to send them away. So communication between teammates is very important. And it goes back to validating who the people are. It doesn't matter if it's on the phone. It doesn't matter if it's phishing, if it's a physical pen test. There's always that first initial reaction, which is to verify who they are before you even allow them in. Or once you get that urgency, like, hey, yeah, we need to get in here right away and we're in a time crunch, always stop and ask yourself, does this make sense? And have I been notified that we're really switching over to another provider? Because that guy was ready to open the door for us. And I guess thankfully for him, the key didn't work. So there's always the verification. and stopping yourself and engage in that critical thinking of who are these people really and do they belong here before you take any action.
The listen to your gut and validate things, so true. But I'm going to give you a little pushback, and I'm going to ask you a question. Most people are extremely extroverted. Most people just want to keep their head down and do what they're supposed to do, and they don't want to make waves in anything. And if you've got somebody who's, an authority person, and they're like, "Hey, you got to let me in," how do you teach people to actually push back on somebody like, "Hey, this guy's got authority over me. I could screw this up. I might lose my job." Like, that's a really
Mhm.
difficult thing for most people. So what do you tell them to, like, no, 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 you should definitely do this?
Right. So the very part that you said, I may lose my job if I question this person of authority. That's what we teach our clients to train their employees on. It doesn't matter if they're a person of authority, if even like you said, you can be an introvert and still be assertive. So having a reward system for if you implement rewards throughout your training, employees will recognize that, hey, I can stop someone even if they're a person of authority. And oftentimes we have the idea that stopping someone is being rude. And you can actually be very effective in stopping a person and still be cordial. And we get that when when employees are trained, we get this all the time, especially with the vision calls. They're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't verify you." And sometimes they'll even be apologetic. "I'm so sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I have to end the call." So even if your personality is not very blunt, like, "Hey, you don't belong here, I need you to leave," you don't have to embrace that if that's not your personality. You can still be very soft spoken per se and embrace the share of responsibility that you have within your company and the level of authority that you have. So we try to also implement that throughout our training when we speak to employees. Realize that while you may not be one of the highest ranking managers, you still have a level of authority and a responsibility to keep your company safe. And that goes a long way.
That's actually a really interesting point, because most employees don't think of themselves as having any authority, right? They know who their boss is and their boss's boss, but they typically don't think of themselves as having any real authority. But
Right.
even the intern, like,
Hmm.
they hold the keys to the kingdom because they have an ID badge that can get them inside. So
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to, yes, being security conscious is very important, but also the culture that you have within an organization is equally as important. If you don't empower your employees to have a share in that responsibility and to speak up, then it doesn't matter how well trained you are if you don't feel empowered enough to stop someone or to speak up.
that's a really good point. Okay, so I want to take you back for just a second because I'm really curious about this. So whether it's over the phone or in person, I'll let you choose. What do you think makes somebody susceptible to social engineering? Like, who are the soft targets in your experience?
Um, so first of all, it would be the untrained employee. But also I've realized that people that are in a rush. So we have some clients that are from the financial sector, and we've spoken to people that are cashiers, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, 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 I have a person in front of me. So what is it that you need again?" And they're unaware. "Oh, you're going to send me a training? Okay. Yeah, this is my user ID." So being untrained and being in a rush and unaware, not taking that time, you can say, "Hey, I'm busy. Can you call me back at another time?" Or, "Hey, I'm busy. Can you send me an email?" If you are busy at the moment and you feel rushed, you don't have to comply with anything at that very moment. So, and that's where, again, it goes back to training. If you're trained that someone is giving you a time constraint of something that needs to be done right away, you need to stop right there. And if you can't verify the person, then hang up and do your due diligence to make sure that this is really the person from IT. So that's where I get the most compromises. People that oftentimes are in a rush and they just want to get the call over and done with.
That's really fascinating. Okay, so the easiest ones are going to be people who are in a rush because they're not thinking, right? They're
Right.
not. Hey, I've got other things to do.
Mhm.
Who would now? Obviously, the people who are trained would be the hardest, but outside of the people who are already trained, who would be
Mhm.
the hard targets?
Targets. Huh. We, uh, in the list of targets that we have, we do have to call some people that are in IT, some people that are software developers, and they're the most difficult targets. And that's not necessarily to say that because they're more intelligent than others, but it's because they have the awareness of these types of attacks. So the fact that they're constantly reading about this, or they're maybe listening to your podcast, or they are very much aware of what's going on in the scene, that's what makes them a difficult target.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, the going through the training that you guys offer is probably going to be one of the best things that a company could do to limit their vulnerability to this. Um, in your experience, how many companies do you think, just a percentage wise, how many companies out there today do you think are prepared for a social engineering attack?
Mm, that would be hard to say as far as percentage, but I can tell you that for the most part, not as many as there should be. Not at all.
I will definitely agree with that. Yeah, that's fair. Um, Yeah, it is interesting. 'Cause one of the when I'm talking to prospective clients, one of the things that I get often is it's a derivative of, well, we don't really know why you should do a physical pen test because we know that you can get inside. And the client or the prospective client is telling you so much about their security posture when they make that statement. It's like, wait, you're not going to hire me to help you because you know that I can get inside. That's
And then you
okay.
get the clients that are like, you know what? I'm going to hire you just to prove you wrong because I know for a fact that you're not going to be able to get in here. And then you go in and everything's unlocked and you find passwords written under keyboards. And once they get the report, they're like, oh, maybe we're not as secure as we thought we were. So there's a lot of a lot of lessons learned in that.
One of the funnier stories that I can think of, or at least that I can mention, was I was doing a government facility a while back, and for some form of two-factor authentication, they had key boxes, scattered throughout the building to get into the secure areas. Good for them, right? Except the key boxes were all open for convenience. So if you got through the front door, all the key boxes are already opened. And towards the end of the engagement, the client asked me, he's like, okay, look, just help us out here. Give us a win. Just push this as far as you can. Try to get caught. And so I ended up taking all the keys from 5 different key boxes on 5 different floors and walked off. And somebody actually did notify security, but because this has never happened before, security said, "Oh, well, I bet the keys are all in use."
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding.
Oh.
So it's funny because based on what you do, you often just kind of like one of those face palm moments. You're just like,
Right. I can't believe this is happening. Oh yeah, they're in use, all right.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But okay, so the reason I said that story was, I mean, one, it's funny, but two, what do you do with those types of things? Like the client is absolutely confident that nope, we are secure, we've got this down pat. And you had mentioned that once you get inside, everything's unlocked, and things aren't the way that they're supposed to be. It's a massive shock for the client.
Right.
So, like, what do you do with that? Like, what's that
Hmm.
conversation like between you and the
Right.
and the client?
So our point is not to embarrass them or make them feel bad necessarily or shame them for any of this. It's a teachable moment. So we take all the vulnerabilities and we go through each one and step by step give them ways to remedy that and help them to come up with solutions so that those are no longer vulnerabilities. And maybe next time we come around, then we won't find everything unlocked or passwords everywhere, you know? So again, it's we try to create a teachable moment. And while our job is to highlight vulnerabilities, we also try to give them ways in how to correct those.
Perfect. That's interesting. Okay, so that gets me into a very very tenuous question that I've had a back and forth with this question for over a decade, and I'm really curious how you're going to answer it. And hopefully, I haven't caused you stress by prefacing it this way. Um,
Interesting. We'll see.
how do you? So one of the things that we like to do, obviously, is try to get pictures of people's ID badges, right?
Hmm.
It's fantastic if they're stupid enough to put them on LinkedIn, like, "Hey, I got a new job," that type of thing. But oftentimes, it just will come down to employees wearing their badges outside the office, going to lunch, going to the train, going to whatever.
Hmm.
How do you keep employees from doing stupid stuff like that outside of the office?
Mm. Well, I would say definitely by establishing strong policies around what is considered sensitive information. So at your job, you know your password is sensitive. So more than likely, you wouldn't share that over the phone or even in person because right off the bat, you know that's something that's considered sensitive or your user ID. So if wearing your badge could lead to a compromise, then that's also a piece of sensitive information. So that also needs to be listed in one of the items that you want to keep just as safe as you would your password. Because again, um, through some of the break-ins that we've done through OSINT, we have found actual employee meetings where they take pictures and they post these pictures and they have their badges and we're able to replicate these. So once companies realize the vulnerability and having these badges, whether it's social media or, like you said, employees going out to lunch, then that can also be treated as a sensitive piece of information that they need to safeguard.
That's interesting. I like that. I like that approach. It's so hard to get people to change their behavior, though, especially because
That is true.
like there's this mentality that people have of like inside the office versus outside the office. Like when I'm at work, I'll do all the right things. When I'm not
Mhm.
at work, I'm on my own. But yeah,
Yeah, unfortunately,
yeah,
it is very hard to have employees change behavior, especially if they walk out of the office and they have their badge on. But you know, once it all goes back to the same principle. If the people at the front are trained, they're going to have multiple ways to verify who you are, not just rely on the badge. So hopefully that's another level of security that they will be implementing as well.
very good. Yeah, no, that's multiple levels of security. What a concept, right? Like
What a concept.
the
Who
people
knew?
should be act
Right.
people should be using. Oh, geez. So okay, so now I know that at the very beginning of this, you were telling me that you guys are capable of getting very sensitive information over the phone in a matter of like 2 to 5 minutes, which is insane.
Yes.
But from the other end of the spectrum, you have kind of state entity plants, right? There's something that I lovingly like to refer to as like basically the infiltration formula. That if I said, "Hey, I want you to get into the board of directors room at Google," no offense, Google, it's just an example, and I said you have 24 hours, most people would fail. But if I said that you had 10 years, most people would succeed, right? Because it's like, okay, worst case scenario, I get a job
Mhm.
there. So here's a question for you. State entities like the Chinese, that I think it's the 1,000 year talent program, and entities like this, they'll have people just get jobs at these locations. And how do you deal with insider threats?
Well, interestingly enough, um, it's difficult for a large company to keep tabs of every employee. However, when you have managers that have been there for X amount of time, having that one-on-one with the different employees, whether it's quarterly meetings, whether it's once a month, you really need to have that interaction with your employees. And just by asking them what their goals are, how they feel about working within the organization, of course, anyone can say whatever it is that you want to hear, but monitoring, any type of specifically of behavior that seems out of the norm and monitoring that could really go a long way from preventing any type of insider threat.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how many of us have worked at major companies or firms or anything else, and you never talk to your manager, or you have these very like you have a very poor relationship in the sense of like you guys never talk, you don't know, and
Right.
it's and when you do talk, it's like 5 minutes over the course of like
Hmm.
months. So yeah, I like that. That's a really good. That's a really useful insight. Um, hmm. So here, okay. So let me ask you this question: when you are doing social engineering, do you prefer to work as a team, or do you prefer to work as solo when you're trying to social engineer somebody?
We always work as a team.
Ah, okay.
So there are many reasons for that. But one of those very practical reasons, if I'm in the building, and that's how we got into the server room in one of our red teamings. I was talking to one of the managers. They were giving us a tour of the building, but then I had another colleague that distracted them while I got into the server room. So if I was monitored by that individual the whole time, I may not have been successful at that. So having another individual that he was asking completely different questions about the building, and the manager was totally distracted by that. And I was able to kind of get lost and get into the server room and, do all kinds of stuff. So having that team component enables us to, it kind of makes it easier for us to do our job in that sense. And also sometimes it goes along with the pretext.
Right.
So, like for example, going back to actually for both, the one that I was a realtor, if my clients weren't with me at the time, maybe that manager wouldn't have felt so pressed to let me in because the fact that my teammates were there and they were my clients and they needed to get in, that was another level of pressure for us to get in there right away. And also with the whole internet provider, as a female, sometimes there are not that many internet providers that are females. So having a male counterpart, it just makes it a lot more seamless. Like, oh, it makes sense. You're a guy and you're training her. So it makes perfect sense for you guys to come in. So for the most part, we always work in teams.
Perfect. No, that's a great answer. And for anybody doing this, I think that's the right answer. It's so
Hmm.
hard to do it alone because there's
Yeah.
everything's on you. So you've told me some of this some of the fun stories that you've gotten to do. Do you have a favorite story? Do you have a favorite social engineering story,
Favorite.
or just one you really like?
So in one of the jobs that we did, we were doing multiple facilities, and one of the employees actually called the other building that we were on our way to do and told them, hey, there's these couple of people, they say they're internet providers, and come to find out they're not, they're trying to get in the building. So they called one of the IT managers who happened to be our contact. Our contact calls us and says, hey, I want you guys to know that your cover has been blown. The other building that you're headed to right now, they know you're not IT. Mind you, they know the pretext, they know the story, but they haven't seen us yet. So we are headed there. And in a split moment, we had to figure out what to do to change the pretext around because that was our last day there. So we zipped up our jackets to cover up the logo from the internet providers, and we went somewhere real quick to print different work orders. So now instead of internet providers, we changed everything around to their electrical company and that there were outages in the area. So we show up and the guy, now this was an armed facility, but the guard was super nice. And he said, I I don't know. I haven't been told that there's any issues with the electricity here. I know there was some kind of issue with people trying to get in the building, pretending to be some other IT, and we're like, what? Like, that's not us. So he's like, let me check with the person that handles our electric and infrastructure and such to see if that's something that they are actually experiencing a problem with. Turns out somehow they were having some kind of problem throughout the week. And we were able to get in. Interestingly enough, he said, you can't just be aware that this is a government facility. You can't record, you can't take pictures. But of course, once we got in, we kind of covertly did everything we weren't supposed to do. But just the fact of being adaptable, like, what do you do? Like, now our pretext is shot. They know that we're not the internet providers. So what do we do? So having that moment where you have to flip the script, so to speak, and become someone else, and just the, I guess, timing that they were having some kind of issue for us to go in and to be able to get in the building regardless. Like, it just goes to show you don't know what you don't know. In any other scenario, I would have been like, that's it. There's no way we're not going to be able to get in. Our cover has been blown, but being adaptable and thinking outside the box, and you just never know what you're going to encounter once you're there. So I thought that was very interesting to be able to experience that.
No, that's fantastic. So it's also interesting because so the client is tipped off, hey, the bad guys are on their way, and this is their cover story. We've had bad guys in the building, all week, and you show up, and they're like, nah, you're fine. Like it's wild that okay.
I know. So I don't know if the guard, so the guard knew, but the fact that we changed the story, but again, you would think that, hmm, um, you're not the internet provider, but could it be? And I think it goes back to the fact that when he checked with the person that was in charge of engineering, he said, "Oh yeah, yeah, let them back in." Like apparently, at some point they did have some issues with their electric. So, you know,
That's
what can you
fantastic.
do?
That's awesome. Oh, jeez. So, sorry, that's funny. So I don't know if you know this group or anything, but there's a group in the United States. They used to be called Project Veritas. Now I think they're James O'Keefe Media or something. But I enjoy watching them just to see the social engineering techniques. And they often, for anybody who doesn't know, basically they just go undercover. They get people to say stuff they really shouldn't. It's all just elicitation strategies and such.
Hmm.
But they typically target high-ranking officials in all branches of government and all branches of this and that. And a lot of people seem to think that if you're in government or you've had any type of training, that you are immune to elicitation and social engineering. Because, I mean, if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, internet, but I think even or sorry, Podesta, no, the former General Podesta, crap, he was the CIA head of the CIA. He got elicited by some journalist. But anyway, but why is it, we think that if you're high up, if you're high ranking, if you're, in a government entity or something, that somehow you couldn't possibly be social engineered. I don't know. I don't know why, but that just seems to be kind of the thought process of like,
Hmm.
it's not possible. Well, hey, if there's an armed guard, obviously you can't get through him. I mean, he's a guard,
Mm,
right? But
yeah.
I don't
Well, I
really
think
know that.
people equate. being vulnerable with your level of intelligence. And in reality, it has nothing to do with that. Basically, if you're a human, you can get social engineered. And it all goes down to being triggered emotionally. So they could appeal to their ego and be social engineered. Once you're operating from that amygdala portion of your brain, which is the emotional center of the brain, then the critical thinking part of the brain is temporarily suspended. So while they may come out of that amygdala hijacking within a certain period of time, there is a moment where if you fall prey to that amygdala hijacked and you're on an emotional high, anyone can fall prey. It doesn't matter if you're in the government or a high ranking official of any sort. If you're human, you can be social engineered.
Okay, so that gets me into a question that I always ask social engineers this because I'm curious as to their thoughts. We all understand that if we were going to send a VIP to a dangerous part of the world, they'd be accompanied by bodyguards. Why do we never send VIPs or scientists or people with a lot of knowledge to dangerous places they're likely to be elicited with some type of social engineering bodyguard? Somebody who's just going to sit next to them and be like, don't say that.
Mm, that is such an interesting concept. I've never thought about that. Well, maybe that's a new field to
It,
be explored because someone that's not going to be they're from an outside perspective, so they can observe like, oh no, no, like right now, you're getting too involved into this conversation. You need to step it back.
yep.
That's a very interesting concept.
So I've never understood why that's not a thing. Like, why is that not a thing? Like, you send scientists and
Hmm.
dignitaries and people to China and to Russia and to these conferences and stuff. You know, there's elicitation going on. You know, the Chinese
Hmm.
are really good at it, and these people are on their own and they're getting drunk and they're flaunting their egos, and you're
Yes,
just like, oh god.
absolutely. And that's where it happens the most in these parties, dinners. So that is just an amazing concept that you have me think about. And yeah, truly, if you're going to protect someone physically and they hold so much important knowledge, critical knowledge, why would you not have someone there to protect that? Yeah, amazing.
Okay, so you've got a new you got a new service, right? Like a social engineering bodyguard.
Yes, I'm gonna bring that up in our next team meeting for sure.
I I just it's always I always like to ask social engineers this, just their opinion on it because it seems so obvious to me. Like, but I never see it as a thing.
That's true. Like I honestly, I never thought about it, but it makes so much sense.
I mean, I remember there was a Chinese contractor who got he was working on the F-22 project. So he's a Chinese guy. He's working for the F-22 project in the United States, and he steals. I think it was the F-22, the C-130 Spectre gunship, like all these blueprints, right? And after it happened, they asked some journalists asked Lockheed Martin, how long and how much money did it take you to develop the F-22? And they're like, I think it took us 12 years and like $2 trillion of R&D.
Mm,
It's like, and the guy walks out with it. It's like that, yeah, protect that,
wow,
protect that.
unbelievable.
So, all right. So going back to social engineering, the a lot of people think when they think of somebody calling you and trying to social engineer you, they think of a lot of people think of like Indian call scammers or Nigerian princes or things like this.
Mm.
What, in your opinion, who are the most likely people to actual threat actors to call somebody and try and get them to do stuff they shouldn't?
Really, that varies, but that's not the norm as much as it used to be. The stereotypical, Indian call center and such. Um, it could be from different entities, but a lot of these people could also employ people that are natural speakers of the language. That way, like their accent is really undetectable. So you can't necessarily, I guess, box it into one group of people. If you have this type of accent, or the pretext is not Nigerian prince, or you're calling to help me fix something in my computer from Microsoft, then you must be legit. So, and that's where a lot of our targets sometimes let their guard down because we sound somewhat like them and we use a lot of their internal lingo. So it goes back to the whole tribe mentality like, hey, they sound like me, they're using the same um, words that we use internally, so they must be one of us. And that's where the danger lies, where it's so undetectable nowadays to realize that you're actually speaking to an imposter.
Yeah, yeah, that's really hard. I mean, well, like you said, especially with AI and
Hmm.
yeah, voice cloning and facial masking and all this kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
it's becoming increasingly difficult to detect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was that famous story of what, last year, I think, the guy in Hong Kong who he thought that I think it was the CTO was calling him with an urgent,
Mm.
"Hey, you need to move $5 million worth of money," and yeah, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
So that actually gets me into a question, just and this is pure speculation, but I'm just curious. How do you think AI is going to affect all this? I mean, obviously, it's going to affect things, but
Yeah, obviously, it's affecting it as we speak. And it's an increasingly growing threat. Where they're using a lot of voice cloning and phishing with AI, but that we have to keep up with the different threats. And that's the difficult part because it seems that it's ever increasing and that almost we can't keep up. Um, so being aware of the different threats, being aware of the different vectors, and just being updated on the actual technology that's out there and how it's used to weaponize human emotion. That can be very powerful. But as well, technology can go but so far. When you have managers, let's say you're implementing keywords that only your employees know. So I may get a call from my manager who, or not from my manager, but sounds like my manager, or let's say on Zoom, I may think I'm speaking to him. But once you have that specific keyword, AI is not going to be able to replicate that. So it goes back to human behavior. We need to enforce that while technology is ever advancing, having multiple ways of verification, um, also behavior. You can replicate how a voice sounds, but pausing and how someone acts, or even particular phrases that they use. So, being attuned to these things can help us to combat a lot of these AI attacks.
yeah, I really like that. I mean, it's crazy to think that we may end up going full circle and going back to like code words and such to like yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
back to basics.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's. I mean, but you're right. It's probably honestly, it probably is going to go that route. Like we're probably going to get to the point where AI is going to get to the point where you can't even tell what's real visually,
Hmm.
through video and such. And now you'll have
Correct.
to go through like some type of cryptographic signing process and if it's not
Hmm.
signed, we just assume it's fake. And yeah, so that's interesting. So one last question that I have before, because I know you need to go, but um, you had mentioned quite a bit that people become their most vulnerable when they are shifted to the emotional side of the spectrum, right? Like the logic and the emotion
Right.
in a social engineering attack, rants, whatever it is, when you are starting to become emotional, you can't simultaneously be very emotional and very logical. So if somebody is successfully making you emotional, what is your suggestion on how to stop that or even recognize it? Because a lot of people don't even
Mhm.
realize I'm becoming emotional.
Yeah, I think you actually just answered that. So recognizing that um, if we are emotionally involved, we're not going to be able to rationalize much of anything. So it comes down to self awareness. And we can practice that in our day to day. Whenever we feel that if we're getting upset, we feel our heartbeats racing, we feel that all of a sudden we sense a bit of fear, urgency, having that self awareness to recognize these signs will enable us to stop for a moment. And while the pause at that very moment does not kick in your critical thinking, but the time will. So recognizing your emotional triggers, recognizing your physical reactions to that, and then allowing time. It could be as little as 30 seconds of deep breathing that can engage critical thinking. And then ask yourself, is this request making sense to me? And why is there urgency associated with this and slight fear? And then you can disengage. So you definitely need to give yourself that space between stimulus and response to be able to take the right action.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that that answer actually. So, last question I want to ask you is if you had the ear to every company, every board of directors, or just people in general, what would you like them to know about social engineering that you don't think that they know, or maybe they do, but what would you like them to know about social engineering?
I would like them to know that social engineering can encompass any technical breach that they could perceive. Because nowadays, a high percentage, um, anywhere from 60 to 80% of these technical breaches start with a human element. So training, again, they don't necessarily need to hire a company to implement certain training. They can designate people within the company to have realistic pretexts, whether it's vishing or phishing, so that their employees know, number one, how to identify that they're under attack. Secondly, how to report it, and also to establish a verification process within the company. And most importantly, to empower employees to speak up if they see anything that is suspicious or that doesn't feel right. Oftentimes, as you said before, many employees feel that they're not empowered to stop an individual. So once they adopt um, that empowerment and having that within their training, as well as having some fun with it and rewarding employees when they do respond appropriately and when they do report vishing or phishing or whatever different types of attacks. That can itself change the whole way of training and create a learning environment within the structure of their company.
Fascinating. I really really like that. I hope that everybody listening to this internalizes that because it's excellent advice. Um, Rosa, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chat with me. But one question that I have, I know I've said last question twice now, but where can people find you?
People can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for me, Rosa Rowles, and we can interact that way. You can reach out to me also through I guess you can find my email at our website, social-engineer LLC. And yeah, if you have any questions, we have a masterminds group as well that I encourage you to join. And yeah, we'll keep in touch.
Excellent. And I look, everybody listening to this, if you have any, input at anything on your company, going from an 80 to 90% failure rate on social engineering tax to a 95% success rate is not a small change. So you might want to
Right.
consider at least reaching out to them and just having a chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Rosa. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. It was great chatting with
Thanks,
you.
Brian. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Excellent. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.